I never thought choosing love would cost me everything I'd ever known. My name is Emma Richardson, and 24 hours ago, I was Daddy's little girl, the heir to Richardson Industries, a pharmaceutical empire worth $3.2 billion. Today, I'm standing in a courthouse hallway wearing a dress I bought off the sale rack, waiting to marry a man my father has never even met. My phone buzzed for the 47th time that morning. Another message from my father, Richard Richardson. I didn't need to read it to know what it said. The previous 46 had made his position crystal clear. Marry James, and you're no longer my daughter. Emma, you okay? James squeezed my hand, his brown eyes searching mine with that gentle concern that made me fall for him in the first place. His suit was borrowed from his roommate. The cuffs were slightly too short. I'm perfect, I lied, silencing my phone. What my father didn't know, what nobody knew except James and me, was that my soon-to-be husband wasn't exactly who he appeared to be. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'd met 8 months earlier at a community center in Brooklyn, where I'd been volunteering to escape the suffocating world of charity galas and board meetings. James was teaching coding to underprivileged kids, his patience and kindness drawing me in like gravity. He lived in a cramped studio apartment, took the subway everywhere, and had never once asked me about my last name or my family's money. For the first time in my life, someone loved me for me. My father saw it differently. When I finally introduced them 6 weeks ago, the dinner lasted exactly 17 minutes before Dad stood up, threw his napkin on the table, and walked out. The next morning, his lawyer delivered an ultimatum: break up with that nobody, or face complete financial disinheritance. I chose James. The ceremony was quick, just us, 2 witnesses we pulled from the courthouse lobby, and a judge who seemed bored by our vows. No flowers. No photographer. No father walking me down the aisle. When James slipped the simple silver band onto my finger, I told myself the hollow feeling in my chest was just wedding jitters. But then came the phone call. We were celebrating with $5 slices of pizza when my phone rang with my father's personal number. Against my better judgment, I answered. You went through with it. His voice was ice. Not a question. Dad, don't. I'm calling to inform you that effective immediately, you've been removed from all Richardson Industries accounts. Your trust fund has been dissolved, and your credit cards have been canceled. The penthouse is being cleared as we speak. You have until 6 p.m. to collect whatever personal items the movers haven't already removed. My slice of pizza hit the paper plate. Dad, please. You made your choice, Emma. A Richardson doesn't settle for mediocrity. When you come to your senses and divorce that leech, we can discuss your return to the family. Until then, you're on your own. The line went dead. James was already standing, his face a mask of concern and barely controlled anger. What did he say? I stared at my phone, watching my entire life evaporate like morning mist. The penthouse where I'd lived since graduating from Yale. The black Amex that had never once been declined. The VP position at Richardson Industries that had been waiting for me since birth. The security of never having to worry about anything, ever. All gone. He cut me off, I whispered. Everything. He actually cut me off. What happened next would change everything, though I wouldn't realize it until months later. James pulled me close, and in that moment of vulnerability, I felt his body relax in a way that seemed almost relieved. Not happy about my pain, but relieved about something else entirely. We'll be okay, he murmured into my hair. I promise you, Emma. We'll be more than okay. There was something in his voice, a certainty that seemed impossible given our circumstances. I pulled back to look at him, searching his face for answers to questions I didn't know how to ask. James, how are we going to? Trust me, he interrupted, and there was that strange confidence again. Your father thinks he's teaching you a lesson, but he's the one who's about to learn something. I had no idea what he meant, but I was about to find out that my poor husband had secrets of his own, secrets that would bring my father to his knees. 6 months of poverty teaches you things that money never could. I learned that generic shampoo works just as well as the $80 bottles I used to buy without thinking. That walking 3 extra blocks to the cheaper grocery store actually matters when you're counting every dollar. That pride tastes bitter when you're crying in a bathroom stall at your new job as a retail associate because a customer just screamed at you over a return policy. Our apartment was a 5th-floor walk-up in Queens, 450 square feet of peeling paint, and neighbors who fought loudly at 2 a.m. It was the most humbling experience of my life. But it was also something else, liberating. James worked from home as a freelance software developer, his laptop perpetually open at our tiny kitchen table. We lived on his modest income, carefully budgeting every expense. I'd offered to get a second job, but he'd insisted one was enough for now, that we needed to be strategic about our time. What struck me most wasn't the poverty itself, it was how unnaturally comfortable James seemed with managing it. He knew exactly which bills to pay when, how to negotiate with landlords, which free resources the city offered. For someone who'd supposedly lived paycheck to paycheck his entire life, he navigated our financial struggles with the precision of someone playing a carefully calculated game. I was too proud to admit it was breaking me. My father had tried calling exactly once in those 6 months, 3 weeks after the wedding. I'd let it go to voicemail. His message was brief. "This experiment of yours needs to end, Emma. You're embarrassing the family. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable." I deleted it without responding. But late at night, when James was asleep and I was staring at water stains on the ceiling, I wondered if Dad was right. If I'd thrown away everything for a love that would eventually crumble under the weight of unpaid bills and broken dreams. Then came the afternoon that shattered everything I thought I knew. I'd gotten off work early. They'd cut my hours, another financial blow we couldn't afford, and decided to surprise James with his favorite cheap takeout. I climbed the 5 flights of stairs, my feet aching in the uncomfortable shoes that were all I could afford, imagining his smile when I walked through the door. That's when I heard his voice through the door, sharp and authoritative in a way I'd never heard before. "I don't care about their timeline, Michael. Tell the board we move on my schedule, not theirs. If they have a problem with that, remind them who holds the majority shares." I froze, key halfway to the lock. "Majority shares? Board? Who is Michael?" "The Singapore deal closes Friday," James continued, his voice cold and businesslike. "I want the contracts on my desk by Thursday. And Michael? The quarterly revenue report better show that 23% increase we projected, or heads will roll." My hand started shaking. The plastic takeout bag crinkled loudly. The apartment went silent. I stood there, paralyzed, my mind racing through impossible explanations. Wrong number? Rehearsing for something? A very elaborate prank? The door swung open. James stood there in his usual worn jeans and faded t-shirt, phone in hand, his expression completely calm. Too calm. "Emma, you're home early. Who were you talking to?" The question came out barely above a whisper. He glanced at his phone, then back at me, and I saw him make a decision. His entire demeanor shifted, shoulders straightening, chin lifting slightly, that easygoing gentleness hardening into something else entirely. "I think we need to talk," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "It's time you knew the truth." I walked past him on numb legs, setting the takeout on the counter without looking at it. When I turned around, James was closing the door, his phone now dark and pocketed. "The truth about what?" I managed. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times, but now it looked different. Calculated. About who I really am. About why I can promise you that everything will be okay. He paused, meeting my eyes with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Emma, my real name is James Chun. My family owns Chun Global Technologies." The room tilted. Chun Global Technologies. I knew that name. Everyone in business knew that name. They were Richardson Industries' biggest competitor in the medical technology sector. A $5 billion empire that had been systematically taking market share from my father's company for the past 3 years. "You're lying," I said automatically, even as puzzle pieces started clicking together in my mind. His confidence with money. The laptop that I now realized was far too expensive for a struggling freelancer. The way he'd never seemed worried, not really, even when I was falling apart. "I'm not." James, or whoever he was, pulled out his phone, fingers moving across the screen before he handed it to me. "Here." I stared at the Forbes article on the screen. James Chun, 31, takes reins as CEO of Chun Global Technologies after father's retirement. The photo showed a man in a custom suit standing in a glass-walled office overlooking Manhattan. He looked older, more polished, but it was unmistakably my husband. "This is dated 8 months ago," I whispered. "When we met, you were already CEO." "Yes." He took the phone back gently. "I was doing volunteer work because I actually believe in giving back, Emma. That part was real. Everything between us was real. But yes, I've been concealing my background." Rage and confusion warred inside me. "Why? Why would you lie to me for 8 months? Initially?" He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Because I wanted to know if you could love someone without money. If you were different from every other woman I'd met who saw only the Chun fortune." His expression softened. "And you were. You are. You chose love over billions, Emma. You proved you're nothing like. Like what? I cut him off, my voice rising. Like my father? Is that what this is about? Some kind of corporate revenge scheme where you seduce the daughter of your biggest competitor? No. He stepped forward, hands raised. Emma, I love you. That was never fake. But I need you to understand, your father didn't just cut you off because he's controlling. He did it because he knows exactly who I am. The world stopped spinning. What? James met my eyes, and what I saw there was pure, calculated strategy. Your father recognized me at that dinner. He knew I was James Chen the moment I walked into the restaurant. And he made a choice. He gambled that cutting you off would make you leave me before you figured out the truth. I sank onto our threadbare couch, my mind reeling. He knew. This whole time, he knew you had money, and he let me think. That you'd married someone who'd keep you in poverty forever. Yes. James sat beside me, careful not to touch me. He thought you'd crack. That living like this would break you, and you'd come crawling back to him. And you. I turned to face him, tears burning my eyes. You let me struggle. You watched me cry over bills and work retail, and eat ramen for dinner. You could have ended this any time, but you let me suffer to prove a point. The guilt that flashed across his face told me everything. I needed to know, he said quietly. I needed to know you'd choose me even when I had nothing to offer. And Emma, you did. Every single day for 6 months, you chose us. By lying to me. I stood up, needing distance. You're just like him. Just like my father. Both of you playing games with my life, testing me, manipulating me. My phone rang. We both stared at it vibrating on the counter. Dad's name lit up the screen. Don't answer it, James said sharply. Emma, wait. But I was already reaching for it, some instinct telling me this call was different. I swiped to accept. Emma. My father's voice was strained, urgent in a way I'd never heard. I need to see you. Today. It's about the company. We're in trouble. I glanced at James, whose expression had shifted to something almost predatory. What kind of trouble? I asked. The kind that ends Richardson Industries if I can't fix it in the next 72 hours. He paused, and I heard something crack in his voice. I need you to come home. And Emma? I need you to bring your husband. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, looking at James. He was standing now, hands in his pockets, watching me with an unreadable expression. He wants to see you, I said. Both of us. He says the company's in trouble. A slow smile spread across James's face. Not the warm, gentle smile I'd fallen in love with, but something sharper. Dangerous. I know, he said simply. I'm the trouble. And just like that, I realized I'd been a pawn in a game I'd never understood I was playing. The question was, whose side was I on? If you're still watching right now, you're exactly the kind of viewer I love. Subscribe so I can keep giving you stories that touch your heart. Hit that bell, so you never miss what happens next. My father's office hadn't changed. Same mahogany desk, same view of Central Park, same portrait of my deceased mother watching over everything like a guardian angel. But the man sitting behind the desk looked like he'd aged a decade in 6 months. Richard Richardson, the titan of industry who'd never shown weakness in his life, had dark circles under his eyes and hands that trembled slightly as he gestured for us to sit. I stayed standing. James settled into a chair with unsettling ease. Emma. Dad's voice cracked on my name. You look poor, I supplied coldly. Isn't that what you wanted? To teach me a lesson about choosing the wrong man. His eyes flicked to James, and something passed between them, an understanding I wasn't part of. It made my blood boil. You knew, I said to my father. From the beginning. You recognized him. Of course I did. Dad stood, walking to the window with his back to us. James Chun, the Golden Boy CEO who's been systematically destroying my company for 3 years. Did you think I wouldn't research the man trying to marry my daughter? And you said nothing. My voice shook. You let me think you were cutting me off because he was poor, because you're a snob, but really, I was trying to protect you from this. He spun around, gesturing at James. From him. From whatever game he's playing. The only game being played here was yours, James said quietly, but his words cut through the room like a knife. You cut Emma off hoping she'd leave me before discovering the truth. You gambled that 6 months of poverty would break her spirit, prove she was weak like you've always feared. But she didn't break, did she, Richard? She proved she's stronger than you ever gave her credit for. Dad's jaw clenched. Don't you dare lecture me about my daughter. Then don't insult her intelligence by pretending this was about her welfare. James leaned forward. You wanted her to fail. You needed her to prove she couldn't survive without you, because if she could, it would mean you were wrong about everything. Stop. I held up a hand, silencing them both. Both of you used me. Both of you lied to me. So before we go any further, I want the truth. All of it. I turned to my father. What trouble is the company in? Dad's shoulders sagged. For the first time in my life, he looked defeated. Chun Global Technologies has been acquiring our suppliers, he said quietly. One by one over the past 6 months. The same 6 months you've been married. He glared at James. They've cornered the market on 3 critical components we need for our flagship medications. As of last Friday, they've refused to sell to us at any price. My stomach dropped. That would shut down production. It already has. Dad moved to his desk, pulling up a spreadsheet on his computer. We have 60 days of inventory. After that, we either find new suppliers, which don't exist for these specialized components, or we shut down our most profitable division. We're looking at a $1.2 billion loss in the first year alone. The stock price has already dropped 34%. I turned to James, who was watching me with careful eyes. You did this? You've been destroying my father's company while pretending to be a poor software developer. I've been running my company, he corrected. Making strategic acquisitions to strengthen our market position. That's business, Emma. It's revenge, Dad spat. Over something that happened 20 years ago. My head snapped up. What happened 20 years ago? The silence that fell was deafening. James stood slowly, moving to stand beside my father's desk. The 2 men stared at each other with barely contained hatred. Tell her, James said softly. Tell her what you did to my father. It was business. Tell her. Dad flinched at James's raised voice. I'd never seen anyone make my father flinch. 23 years ago, Dad said finally. Before you were born, Emma, I was partners with James's father in a startup pharmaceutical company. We were developing a revolutionary cancer treatment together. He paused, his face hardening. When the treatment showed promise, I bought him out before the patents were filed. I offered him $2 million for his share of the company. He took it. You didn't tell him the FDA approval was coming through, James interjected, his voice deadly quiet. You didn't tell him that his research was about to be worth billions. You let your partner, your friend, sell his life's work for pennies on the dollar. He signed the contract, Dad said defensively. I didn't force him. That research became Richardson Industries Foundation, James continued, speaking to me now. The cancer treatment that made your family billions? My father invented it. He spent the $2 million trying to start over, failed, and had to rebuild from nothing. It took him 15 years to create Chun Global Technologies. 15 years of my childhood watching my father work himself to exhaustion, knowing he'd been betrayed by someone he trusted. I felt sick. Dad, is this true? His silence was answer enough. So what? I turned to James. You seduced me, married me, let me suffer to get revenge on my father for something he did decades ago? No. James's expression softened. I seduced you because you were beautiful and kind and real. I married you because I love you. But did I see an opportunity to gain leverage over your father? Yes. I won't lie to you anymore, Emma. I'm done lying. How noble, Dad sneered. You're still using her. Am I? James pulled out his phone, fingers moving across the screen. Because I'm about to do something that makes no business sense whatsoever. He hit send on something, then pocketed the phone. I just instructed my VP of Acquisitions to offer Richardson Industries a 5-year supply contract for all the components you need. At cost. No markup. Dad's eyes widened. What's the catch? The catch is that Emma deserves better than being caught between our war. James looked at me, his expression raw and honest. I can't change that I lied to you. I can't change that I used our relationship as leverage. But I can choose to end it. Your father and I can destroy each other on our own time, without dragging you through hell. You're just going to give up your advantage? Dad looked suspicious. Walk away from a billion-dollar opportunity? I'm choosing my wife over revenge, James said simply. Something you should have done 6 months ago. The accusation hung in the air. Dad's face went purple. How dare you? I was protecting her. You were controlling her. James shot back. You cut her off to prove she needed you, to punish her for choosing someone you didn't approve of. That's not protection, Richard. That's abuse. And lying to her for 8 months is better? No, it's not. James turned to me, and I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. I was wrong, Emma. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. But at least I'm admitting it. At least I'm choosing you now, even though it costs me everything I've been working toward. My father opened his mouth to respond, but his desk phone buzzed urgently. He glanced at it, and his face went pale. What? I asked. He pressed the intercom. Not now, Jennifer. Sir, I'm sorry, but the SEC is on line 1. They say it's urgent. Something about an investigation into. Dad disconnected the call, but the damage was done. James and I both stared at him. Investigation? I asked quietly. What investigation? It's nothing, Dad said quickly. A routine audit. The SEC doesn't do urgent calls about routine audits. James's voice had gone cold again. What did you do, Richard? I did what I had to do to save my company from your sabotage. Dad's mask finally cracked completely. You wanted to destroy Richardson Industries? Fine. But I wasn't going to let you do it without a fight. What did you do? I repeated, my voice ice. Dad met my eyes, and I saw desperation there. Fear. I may have restructured some assets, moved some funds between subsidiaries, created some efficiencies in our accounting that might not technically comply with every single regulation, but you cooked the books, James said flatly. Jesus Christ, Richard. You committed securities fraud. I saved my company. You committed federal crimes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad, do you understand what you've done? If the SEC is calling, if they're investigating, they won't find anything, he insisted. I was careful. I have lawyers, accountants, people who know how to make this go away. James's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted to something unreadable. Emma, he said carefully. I need to tell you something else. The room suddenly felt too small. What? I whispered. 3 weeks ago, someone anonymously sent the SEC evidence of accounting irregularities at Richardson Industries. He paused, his eyes never leaving mine. That someone was me. The world tilted sideways. You. I couldn't form words. You turned my father in? You reported him to federal investigators? I found evidence of his fraud during due diligence for a potential acquisition, James said. I had a choice, use it as blackmail, ignore it, or report it. I chose to report it because it was illegal, Emma. Because companies don't get to break laws just because it's convenient. Because it would destroy him, I said numbly. Because it was one more move in your revenge game. Because it was the right thing to do, James insisted, but I could see the truth in his eyes. It was both. My father sank into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. So that's it then. You've won. You'll take my company, my reputation, my freedom. Was it worth it, James? Does my destruction taste sweet enough? Dad, I started, but I didn't know what to say. He'd committed crimes. He'd broken the law. But he was still my father. And James had turned him in while lying in bed beside me, pretending to be someone he wasn't. I need to go, I said abruptly, backing toward the door. I need to think. I need to. I can't be here right now. Emma, wait. James stood, reaching for me. Don't touch me. I jerked away. Either of you. I'm done being a piece in your game. I fled the office, my father's secretary calling after me, James's footsteps following. I made it to the elevator, stabbing the button frantically, willing the doors to close before he caught up. They didn't. James stepped in beside me as the doors slid shut, trapping us in the small space together. Emma, please listen. To what? I rounded on him. More lies? More justifications? You used me, James. You married me, let me fall in love with you, watched me struggle and cry and break, all while plotting my father's destruction. And you want me to what? Understand. I want you to see that this isn't black and white, he said desperately. Your father destroyed my family. He broke the law to do it. Was I wrong to lie to you? Yes. But was I wrong to seek justice? Justice? I laughed bitterly. This isn't justice. This is revenge. And I was just collateral damage. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby. I walked out without looking back. But James's voice followed me. I love you, Emma. That was never a lie. And I'm begging you, don't make a decision until you hear what I have to say tomorrow. I paused at the building entrance, not turning around. Why tomorrow? Because tomorrow you'll find out that everything you think you know is wrong, he said quietly. Tomorrow the real game begins. I walked out into the cold New York evening, leaving both my husband and my father behind, and wondered if I'd ever been anything more than a pawn. But James's words haunted me. Tomorrow the real game begins. What the hell did that mean? I spent the night in a hotel I couldn't afford, charging it to the credit card I'd secretly kept hidden for emergencies. The irony wasn't lost on me. Even after 6 months of poverty, I'd held onto one tiny safety net. Maybe I'd never really believed I could survive without it. Maybe my father had been right about me all along. At 7 a.m., a knock on my door made me jump. I opened it to find James standing there with 2 coffees and an expression of determined resolve. "How did you find me?" I asked, not moving to let him in. "You used your emergency card. I've had alerts on it since the day your father cut you off." He held up a hand before I could explode. "Not to track you. To make sure you were safe if something went wrong." I wanted to stay angry, but exhaustion was winning. I took the coffee and stepped aside to let him enter. "You said everything I think I know is wrong," I said, settling onto the edge of the bed. "So enlighten me. What truth am I missing?" James set his coffee down and pulled out his phone. "Before I show you this, I need you to understand something. When I met you, I'd been investigating your father for 3 years. I knew about his fraud. I knew about the ways he'd built his empire on other people's work. And yes, I wanted revenge. I know all this. But what I didn't know," he continued, "was that you'd been investigating him too." My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. "What?" James turned his phone toward me. On the screen was a video, security footage from Richardson Industries dated 2 years ago. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. The camera angle showed my father's office, and there, sitting at his computer, was me. I watched myself pull up files, copy them to a flash drive, my face set in grim determination. "Where did you get this?" I whispered. "From your father's head of security. He's been keeping records of your late-night visits to the office for years." James swiped to another video, this one from 18 months ago. Same scene, same purpose. "Emma, you've been collecting evidence of your father's illegal activities for almost 3 years. The question is, why?" I set down the coffee before I dropped it. My hands were shaking. I never. But the memories were flooding back now, pieces I'd buried under the chaos of the past 6 months. Late nights at the office. Files that didn't add up. Subsidiaries that existed only on paper. The slowly growing horror as I realized what my father had been doing. "You were going to turn him in," James said softly. "Before you met me, before any of this, you were building a case against your own father. To save the company," I heard myself say. He was going to destroy everything if someone didn't stop him. The fraud, the accounting schemes, they were going to come out eventually. I thought if I documented everything, found the evidence, I could force him to clean it up before it was too late. But then you met me. James sat beside me on the bed. And suddenly you had an escape route. A reason to leave Richardson Industries, to step away from the burden of being the whistleblower who destroyed her own family. The accusation hit like a slap. "That's not, I loved you. I chose you because—" "I know you loved me," he interrupted gently. "But Emma, didn't some part of you also choose me because I was the perfect excuse? Your father would cut you off, you'd leave the company, and someone else could deal with Richard Richardson's crimes. I wanted to deny it. But sitting there looking at video evidence of my own investigation, I couldn't. Maybe," I admitted quietly. "Maybe I was relieved when he cut me off. Maybe I was tired of being the one who had to fix everything, who had to be responsible for saving a company built on theft and fraud." Tears burned my eyes. "Maybe I'm just as much of a coward as he thinks I am. Or maybe," James said, "you're exactly who I need you to be." I looked up at him through blurred vision. "What?" He pulled up another document on his phone, this one a legal filing. "The SEC investigation isn't just about the fraud I reported. They've expanded it. Someone provided them with 3 years' worth of evidence documenting every illegal transaction, every fraudulent account, every violation of securities law." He paused. "Someone who had access to the Richardson Industries systems. Someone with intimate knowledge of how the company operates." My blood ran cold. "You think I—" "No." James showed me the document. "I know you didn't. Because I checked the timestamps on when this evidence was submitted. It was sent 2 days after our wedding, from your father's office computer. Emma, your father turned himself in. The room spun. That's impossible. Why would he?" "Because of this." James pulled up an email dated 6 months and 3 days ago, the day after our wedding. It was from my father to his legal team. "Effective immediately, I am instructing you to compile all evidence of accounting irregularities and securities violations within Richardson Industries for voluntary disclosure to the SEC. My daughter has chosen to leave the company. It's time I face the consequences of my actions before she's forced to." I read it 3 times, but the words didn't make sense. "He knew I'd been investigating him," I whispered. "He's known for years," James confirmed. "He's been watching you collect evidence, waiting to see what you'd do with it. When you married me and walked away, He realized you were trying to escape the burden of turning him in. So he did it himself. But why? If he knew the fraud would destroy the company, why confess? James's expression softened. Because he loves you, Emma. In his terrible, controlling, manipulative way, he loves you. He'd rather face prison than watch you destroy yourself trying to save him. A sob escaped my throat. He cut me off. He let me suffer. He tested you, James corrected. He wanted to see if you'd come running back, or if you were strong enough to survive without him. And you were. He took my hand carefully. Emma, your father is a criminal. He's manipulative and controlling, and he's hurt a lot of people. But he's also trying to protect you the only way he knows how. By taking responsibility for his own crimes. And you. I pulled my hand away. You still lied to me for 8 months. You still used me. I did. He didn't deny it. But Emma, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to show you who I really am. No more lies. No more games. He stood, walking to the window. Your father's company is going to collapse. The SEC investigation will see to that. But you know what I realized last night? What? I don't want it anymore. He turned to face me. I spent 3 years planning revenge, 6 months executing it. And in the end, all I want is you. Really you, not the pawn or the weapon or the leverage. Just Emma. That's convenient, I said bitterly. Now that you've already destroyed everything. I can't undo what I've done to Richardson Industries, he admitted. But I can do this. He pulled out a folder from his bag, actual paper which seemed almost archaic in the moment. Inside were legal documents. This is a buyout offer, he explained. Chun Global Technologies will acquire Richardson Industries for $2.8 billion. Your father will face criminal charges for his fraud, but his employees won't lose their jobs. The Richardson name will be retired, but the company will survive. He set the folder on the bed between us. And 40% of the acquisition price will be held in a trust. For you. I stared at the numbers swimming across the page. $1.12 billion? You're offering me over $1 billion. I'm offering you independence, he corrected. From me, from your father, from everyone. Enough money that you never have to choose between love and security again. You can leave me, divorce me, and never worry about money for the rest of your life. Why would you do this? Because I love you, he said simply. And because I want you to choose me, really choose me, knowing you don't need me. Not for money, not for security, not for anything except love. I looked at the papers, then at my husband, then back at the papers. One signature and I'd have everything I'd lost and more. Freedom. Security. The power to walk away. There's one condition, James added quietly. Of course there was. What? Before you sign, before you decide anything, you need to talk to your father. Really talk to him. Hear his side of everything. He moved toward the door. I'll be at our apartment. Not the penthouse, not a hotel. Our 5-floor walk-up in Queens. If you want to find me, that's where I'll be. He left, closing the door softly behind him. I sat alone with the acquisition documents and my father's email and the weight of too many secrets. My phone rang. Dad's number. I almost didn't answer. But James was right about one thing. I needed the truth. All of it. Hello, Emma. My father's voice was rough, like he'd been crying. Richard Richardson never cried. Please come home. Not to the penthouse, to my house in the Hamptons. There's something I need to show you. Something I should have shown you years ago. Dad, I know you turned yourself in. I know about the evidence. Silence. Then, James told you. Yes. Then you also know I'm probably going to prison. His voice cracked. Which is why I need to see you today. Before they arrest me, before this all falls apart, I need you to understand why I did everything I did. Please, Emma. One last conversation. That's all I'm asking. I thought about refusing. About signing James's papers and walking away from both of them. But I'd spent 6 months learning that running away doesn't solve anything. I'll be there in 2 hours, I said. Thank you. He sounded relieved. And Emma? Bring James. He deserves to hear this too. The line went dead, leaving me with more questions than answers. What could my father possibly say that would make any of this make sense? The Hamptons' house was quiet, wind whipping off the ocean as James and I climbed the front steps. I'd called him from the car, and he'd met me at the train station without a word, just taking my hand as we made the journey together. My father opened the door before we could knock. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, gray, diminished, human in a way that broke something inside me. Thank you for coming, he said, stepping aside. Both of you. The living room was exactly as I remembered from childhood weekends. White couches, ocean views, family photos everywhere. But now I noticed what I'd been too young to see before. There were no photos of my father. Every picture was of my mother and me, or just me, or my mother alone. Sit, Dad instructed, gesturing to the couches. Please. We sat. He remained standing, pacing by the windows. 24 years ago, he began, I made the worst decision of my life. I betrayed my best friend and business partner, Daniel Chun. He looked at James. Your father. I convinced him to sell his share of our research before the breakthrough happened, knowing it would make me rich and leave him with nothing. I know this story, James said tightly. You know the business part, Dad corrected. You don't know why. He turned to face us fully. I did it because your father was in love with my wife. The room went silent. What? James stood slowly. Your father and Emma's mother, Catherine, had been dating before I met her, Dad continued, his voice heavy with old pain. Daniel introduced us at a company party. Catherine and I fell for each other, hard and fast. She broke up with Daniel to be with me. He paused. Daniel never forgave me. He said he was fine with it, that we could all be adults, that the business was more important than personal feelings. But I saw how he looked at her. I saw the resentment every time we were all together. So you destroyed him? I asked quietly. Because he loved her first? I destroyed him because I was terrified he'd take her back. Dad's shoulders sagged. The cancer research was about to make us billions. With that kind of money, that kind of success, what was to stop Catherine from realizing she'd chosen the wrong man? Daniel was smarter than me, kinder than me, better than me in every way. I couldn't compete with that. So you bought him out before the patents were filed, James said slowly. You made sure he'd be poor while you were rich. I made sure Catherine would stay with me, Dad corrected. And it worked. She never left. We built a life together, had Emma, created an empire. His voice broke. And then, when Emma was 3 years old, Catherine was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. The very disease we'd been researching. I remembered my mother in fragments, soft hands, gentle voice, the smell of lavender. She died when I was 5. The treatment we'd developed could have saved her, Dad whispered. But it was still experimental. The FDA wouldn't approve compassionate use. I tried everything, money, lawyers, political pressure. Nothing worked. He looked at James with red-rimmed eyes. Your father could have helped. He had connections at the FDA from his previous research. One phone call from Daniel Chun, and Catherine might have gotten the treatment. He refused, James said, understanding dawning. He said it wouldn't be ethical to bypass the trials. That compassionate use would set a dangerous precedent. Dad's hands clenched into fists. He let the woman he'd loved die to make a point about ethics. Or, I said softly, he let her die because you destroyed his career and he had no reason to help you. Dad flinched. Yes, that too. James sank back onto the couch, looking shaken. My father never told me any of this. Why would he? Dad moved to the mantel, picking up a photo of my mother. He rebuilt his life, created Chun Global Technologies, raised you to be a better man than I ever was. And then you came back to destroy me, not knowing that I'd already destroyed myself years ago. This doesn't excuse what you did, I said firmly. Not the betrayal, not the fraud, not cutting me off. No, Dad agreed. It doesn't. But Emma, I need you to understand something. He set down the photo and pulled out an old leather journal. Your mother knew she was dying. The last months of her life, she wrote letters. To you, to me, to Daniel. He held out the journal with shaking hands. This one is for you. I was supposed to give it to you on your 25th birthday, but I think you need it now. I took the journal carefully, opening it to see my mother's handwriting. My darling Emma, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if your father has been true to his nature, he's probably driven you away with his controlling, fearful love. So I need to tell you what he won't. You are not responsible for fixing his mistakes. Tears blurred the words. I kept reading. Your father destroyed his friendship with Daniel Chun out of fear. Fear of losing me, fear of being alone, fear of not being enough. That same fear will make him try to control you, to keep you close, to test your love over and over. But Emma, you are my daughter too. You are stronger than his fear. Don't let him cage you with guilt or obligation. And don't let revenge, yours or anyone else's, dictate your choices. The entry went on for pages, my mother's wisdom reaching across death to guide me. The final paragraph made me sob. If you find love, real love, grab it with both hands and don't let go. Not for money, not for family, not for anything. I chose your father despite knowing he'd betrayed his friend, and I never regretted it. Love is the only thing worth fighting for. Everything else is just noise. I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. She knew, I whispered. About the betrayal, about everything, and she chose you anyway. She did, Dad said quietly. And she'd want you to choose James. Despite the lies, despite the manipulation, despite everything. He looked at my husband. She'd see what I can finally see now. That you love my daughter enough to give her a choice. Something I never did. James reached for my hand. I let him take it. The SEC will arrest me in approximately 6 hours, Dad continued, checking his watch. I'll plead guilty to all charges. The company will be acquired by Chun Global Technologies. And Emma, you'll inherit your mother's trust fund. The one I couldn't touch when I cut you off. It's worth about $340 million. He smiled sadly. Your mother made me promise when we married that you'd always have your own money, your own independence. She was smarter than both of us. Dad, my voice broke. I don't want forgiveness, he interrupted. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that cutting you off was the hardest thing I've ever done. I did it because I needed to know you could survive without me. That you wouldn't crumble under pressure like I did. And you didn't, Emma. You proved you're your mother's daughter, not mine. I'm both, I corrected, standing. I have her strength and your stubbornness and my own choices to make. I walked to my father and, for the first time in 6 months, hugged him. He held on like I was the only thing keeping him standing. I'm angry at you, I said into his shoulder. For the lies, for the control, for all of it. But you're still my father. And I'm not going to abandon you. You should, he whispered. You should run far away and never look back. Then I really would be just like you, I said, pulling back. Running from fear instead of facing it. I turned to James, who was watching us with carefully neutral expression. We need to talk, I told him. Alone. Dad nodded, excusing himself to his study. James and I walked out to the beach, the ocean wind whipping around us. You lied to me, I started. You used me. You married me as part of a revenge plot. Yes, he agreed simply. But you also gave me a choice. You offered me freedom and independence and a way out. Yes. And you fell in love with me anyway, despite planning to destroy my father. Yes. He turned to face me fully. Emma, I can't change the past. I can't undo the lies or the manipulation. But I can promise you this. From this moment forward, no more games. No more secrets. Just you and me building something real. I have $340 million from my mother, I said. And potentially $1.12 billion from your acquisition. I don't need you financially. I know. I could divorce you tomorrow and live very comfortably for the rest of my life. I know. So why would I stay? I asked, searching his face. James smiled. The real smile, the one I'd fallen in love with in a Brooklyn community center a lifetime ago. Because the last 6 months, living in that walk-up apartment, eating cheap takeout and arguing about bills, that was the happiest I've ever been, he said. Not because of the revenge plot or the corporate warfare or any of it. Because I got to come home to you every night. Because you made me laugh. Because you chose me when you thought I had nothing to offer. You did have nothing to offer, I corrected. That was a lie. Was it? He pulled out his phone, showing me his banking app. This is my personal account. The money I actually live on, separate from Chun Global Technologies. The balance showed $47,000. Everything else is company assets, stock, investments I can't touch without board approval. This is what I actually have, Emma. This is what I've been living on while pretending to be poor, because it's the truth. I'm cash poor. I own billions on paper, but in practice I live month to month like everyone else. I stared at the screen, then at him. You actually were living on a budget. Every fight we had about money was real, he confirmed. Every time I said we couldn't afford something, I meant it. The only thing I lied about was the potential. The someday wealth versus the right now reality. You're an idiot, I said, but I was smiling through tears. Probably, he agreed. But I'm your idiot if you'll have me. I looked at my husband, really looked at him. At the man who'd lied to me, but also loved me. Who'd used me but also freed me. Who'd sought revenge but chosen mercy. I need time, I said finally. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not my father's daughter or your wife or anyone's anything. I need to stand on my own first. The hope in his eyes dimmed but didn't die. I understand. But, I continued, I'm not saying no. I'm saying not yet. Give me 6 months. 6 months to use my mother's money to build something of my own, to figure out what Emma Richardson actually wants from life. And then we'll talk about us. 6 months, he repeated. I can do 6 months. No contact, I added. I need real space, James. No checking in, no coffee dates, no just seeing how you are. That's going to be torture, he admitted. Good. I kissed him softly. You deserve a little torture after what you put me through. He laughed, pulling me close. Fair enough. 6 months, starting when? Starting now. I stepped back, even though it physically hurt. I'll have lawyers draw up a separation agreement. We'll revisit everything in October. And your father? I looked back at the house where my dad was probably watching us from a window. He made his choices. He'll face the consequences. But I'll be there for him through the trial and whatever comes after. He's still my father. You're a better person than either of us deserve, James said softly. I'm my mother's daughter, I corrected. She chose love over fear. I'm choosing myself over everyone else's expectations. There's a difference. I walked away from my husband on that beach, my heart breaking and healing simultaneously. Behind me was a father facing prison and a marriage in limbo. Ahead was uncertainty and independence, and the terrifying freedom of choice. 6 months later, I'd built a nonprofit using my mother's money, funding cancer research and supporting families facing medical debt. I'd visited my father in a minimum security prison, where he was serving 3 years for securities fraud. I'd learned to code, traveled alone through Southeast Asia, and discovered I actually liked being single. And on October 1st, exactly 6 months from that day on the beach, I stood outside a 5th-floor walk-up in Queens, my finger hovering over the buzzer. James answered on the first ring. Emma, I've been thinking, I said into the intercom, about choices and consequences and what my mother said about love being the only thing worth fighting for. And I smiled at the camera I knew was there. Buzz me up. We need to talk about our marriage. The door clicked open. I climbed those 5 flights of stairs one last time. Not as a woman running from her father's control or a pawn in someone else's game, but as myself. Just Emma, making my own choice. Whatever happened next, it would be on my terms. And that made all the difference. 3 years later, Chun Richardson Medical Foundation announced a breakthrough in cancer treatment, funded by a $2 billion joint investment from CEO Emma Chun and her husband, Chairman James Chun. The foundation's mission statement, written by Emma herself, read simply, "In memory of Catherine Richardson, who taught us that love and truth can coexist, if we're brave enough to demand both."